Go ahead. Walk away, my father said, his voice echoing off the marble walls of the empire he built, and I helped sustain. He smirked over his glass of bourbon, the same one he used to toast every victory he never credited me for. You wouldn't last a week without me, Claire. Without my name, you're nothing. I didn't argue. I didn't cry. Instead, I placed my keys, my company badge, and the platinum card he'd given me onto his desk, each one a silent resignation, each one a declaration of war. He thought I'd crawl back, begging for forgiveness. He didn't know I'd already memorized every number, every account, every secret that kept his empire alive. When I closed that office door behind me, I wasn't walking away from his world. I was walking toward mine, the one he could never control. The boardroom smelled like money and arrogance, my father's favorite cologne. I'd spent years in that room learning how to read faces, how to hide emotion, how to stay silent when men spoke over me. Today, I didn't bother hiding anything. Do you know what loyalty means, Claire? My father asked, leaning back in his leather chair like a king on trial. It means understanding your place. My place? I repeated. You mean, under your thumb? He exhaled a laugh, low and sharp. Without me, you're just a degree and a last name. You think investors will follow you because you're smart? They'll follow you because you're mine. He always said mine like ownership, not family. I slid a folder across the glass table. Inside were blueprints for the renewable energy branch I'd been building quietly for months, my project, my vision. He flipped through the papers, unimpressed. You want to run this? Fine. Under Whitmore Enterprises. Under me. No, I said, steady. Under Aurelia Capital. Independently. The silence that followed felt heavier than any shout. Even the wall clock hesitated before ticking again. His expression hardened, years of entitlement folding into a smirk. You're delusional. You wouldn't last a week without my funding. Then consider this my experiment, I replied. He stood, voice rising. You walk out that door, you walk away from your inheritance, your shares, your trust, your home. Then I guess I'm homeless, I said, gathering my laptop. But free. I turned for the door. His words chased me like a whip. You'll come back, he said. They all do. I paused at the threshold. The city lights glared through the panoramic windows behind him, his empire glowing like a cage. Maybe, I whispered. But not as your daughter, as your rival. His face went pale, the first crack in his perfect composure. I left before he could answer. The elevator ride down 25 floors felt endless. My reflection in the mirrored wall looked like someone I didn't know yet. Someone dangerous, untethered. Outside, the night wind tasted like gasoline and rain. I breathed it in like freedom. That was the last time I ever called him Dad. The night I walked out of Whitmore Tower, Manhattan felt colder than I remembered. For years I'd looked down on the city from floor 25, thinking I owned a piece of it. Now I was just another stranger dragging a suitcase across wet pavement. The doorman didn't stop me. No one did. That's the thing about power once it shifts. Everyone senses it. I checked into a tiny apartment in Brooklyn that smelled faintly of paint thinner and cheap takeout. The place had one window, a creaky radiator, and a door that stuck halfway. But it was mine, paid for with the last of my private trading account, the one my father didn't know existed. When I finally sat down, exhaustion hit me like gravity. I'd walked away from an empire with nothing but a laptop, a backup drive, and a plan no one believed I had. That night, I sent one message. To Noah Blake. Subject: need a favor. Not the illegal kind yet. Noah replied within an hour. Of course it's you. Coffee? 7 a.m.? Same place. The next morning, I found him at the same corner cafe we used to haunt in grad school. He looked older now. Beard, rolled sleeves, a lawyer's confidence that came from surviving a few disasters. You look different, he said, as I sat down. Less corporate hostage, more fugitive. Fugitive's accurate, I said, wrapping my hands around a chipped mug. I left Whitmore. He blinked. You what? Resigned. Walked out. No inheritance, no trust fund. Just me. Noah leaned back, studying me like I was a case file. So, this is about independence? Or revenge? I smirked. Why not both? He grinned despite himself. You've got that Whitmore fire. Dangerous combination. I call it survival, I said. I've got data projects my father buried because they weren't profitable enough. I want to rebuild them. Clean. Transparent. A new company, Aurelia Capital. He whistled softly. You're serious? As a heart attack, I said. I'll need you to draft the incorporation papers. And maybe set up a few blind accounts. Offshore. Legal gray, not black. He tapped his pen on the table. Claire, if your father finds out, he will. I cut in. He always does. That's why I'm doing it now. By the end of the week, Noah had filed the paperwork under a name my father would never think to check my mother's maiden name. Aurelia Capital, LLC, Delaware registered, untouchable. Every dollar I'd saved from silent stock trades went into the first fund. Every contact who'd ever believed in me, 2, maybe 3 people, agreed to small seed investments. It wasn't much, but it was mine. At night, I worked until the sun bled through the blinds, watching my father's name fade from headlines while mine quietly took root in startup news columns. The irony? Every bit of financial strategy I used, he'd taught me himself. One night, Noah called. You realize you've just declared war, right? I'm aware. And what's your first move, General Whitmore? I smiled into the darkness. Simple. Burn the old empire down one ledger at a time. By the second week, Aurelia Capital existed at least on paper. A name, an address, and a promise that I'd never be anyone's shadow again. But paper doesn't stop ghosts from following you, especially the ones named Whitmore. Every night, I'd scroll through financial reports like they were old love letters, except these were written in numbers and lies. Whitmore Enterprises was too perfect, too polished. No corporation that clean stayed that way without bleach. And I knew my father's hands had been in the bleach for decades. Then one evening, Noah dropped a flash drive on my desk. I shouldn't have this, he said. But one of my clients used to audit Whitmore's subsidiaries. You might want to see for yourself. I plugged it in. The screen filled with spreadsheets, transaction logs, offshore accounts in the Caymans, and one folder named Horizon Holdings. My stomach turned. Horizon had been my proposal 3 years ago, an investment in sustainable energy, the project he'd laughed at. But here it was, alive under his name, not mine, funded by shell companies, profits redirected to a trust labeled R. Whitmore Sr. I stared at the numbers, every digit a betrayal. He told me it was too idealistic, I whispered. Yeah, Noah said. Idealistic must be code for profitable. The next day, I walked straight into Whitmore Tower. No clearance, no appointment, just purpose. The security guard hesitated, but let me through. The Whitmore name still opened doors, even for exiles. When the elevator opened onto the 25th floor, the smell hit me again. Cedar, scotch, expensive ink. The scent of control. My father's assistant, Diana, froze when she saw me. Miss Claire, you can't just... I'm not here to see him, I said. I'm here to collect what's mine. Before she could react, I slipped past her into the glass-walled boardroom, empty chairs, a long table. But the walls whispered. I pressed my palm to the cool glass and saw reflections of every meeting we'd ever had. The same men laughing, applauding him, dismissing me. I pulled a small device from my bag, a wireless receiver. My father always recorded meetings, his vanity documented every conversation. The cloud server's access key was in those recordings. It took 30 seconds to find the signal. And then there he was. His voice, calm and sharp as a scalpel. She's sentimental, he said. Idealists are easy to control. Keep her close, let her think she's involved, and when it's time to cut her out, she'll thank you for the opportunity. Hearing it was worse than betrayal. It was anatomy how he dissected people, piece by piece, until they stopped being threats. I copied the files, heart pounding, as footsteps echoed in the hallway. My father's voice drifted closer. Diana, did I hear someone in here? I yanked the drive, shut down the laptop, and slipped behind the side door connecting to the storage room. Through the crack, I watched him enter the man who taught me everything about leverage, standing in a room surrounded by his own ghosts. He paused, glancing at the head chair where I used to sit during meetings. Ungrateful girl, he muttered, pouring himself a drink. For the first time, I didn't feel small. I felt dangerous. When I left the tower, the city lights no longer looked like chains. They looked like chess pieces. And I was finally learning how to play. The night I stole my father's files, I couldn't sleep. The numbers burned behind my eyelids: shell companies, false charities, fake investment funds. He hadn't built an empire. He'd built a house of cards, and he'd used my name to hold it steady. By dawn, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. Just one line of text. If you want the rest, meet me at the Riverside Cafe. 10 a.m., come alone. I should have deleted it. Instead, I found myself sitting in a quiet corner booth 2 hours later, watching the door. That's when Margaret walked in. She was my father's longest-serving employee, the woman who'd practically raised me while he climbed stock markets and boardrooms. Silver hair pinned tight, beige coat, eyes that had seen too much and said too little. When she sat across from me, her hands trembled around the coffee cup. "I wondered how long it would take you," she said softly. "To what?" "To see him for what he really is." She slid a small metal tin across the table, the kind that used to hold mints. Inside were 3 USB drives and a photo of my mother. It was old, candid, grainy, my mom laughing at a picnic, something I hadn't seen in years. "I kept this," Margaret said. "Your father would have destroyed it. He didn't like reminders of her independence." My throat tightened. "What's on these drives?" "Everything," she whispered. "Meeting transcripts, fund transfers, internal memos. I've been keeping copies for years. Your father thinks loyalty means silence. I call it record-keeping." I stared at her. "Why now?" "Because I'm old, Claire. And tired. I watched him destroy good people, your mother included. I won't watch him destroy you too." She explained how he'd covered up losses through dummy charities, naming them after deceased employees. How he'd funneled millions into offshore trusts while preaching ethics at investor luncheons. And then she told me the worst part, that my signature was on half the documents. He'd been using my digital ID for years, hiding behind my name. It wasn't just betrayal. It was identity theft on a global scale. I exhaled, trying to steady my voice. "If I go public, he'll bury me." Margaret shook her head. "Not if you bury him first." Back in my apartment, Noah stared at the data Margaret gave me. "This is a career ender," he muttered. "If you leak this, you'll nuke Whitmore Enterprises. That's the idea." He looked at me for a long time. "Claire, you're talking about your father." "No," I said. "I'm talking about a criminal." Silence hung between us, heavy, final. Then Noah nodded slowly. "All right. If you're doing this, you're not doing it alone." For the first time, I smiled. "I never thought I'd say this, but I think I just found my first investor." He raised an eyebrow. "In revenge? In justice." That night, I backed up every file to 3 separate encrypted clouds. On the screen, my father's empire flickered like a dying constellation, each document another star about to burn out. Margaret's final words echoed in my mind. "Empires don't fall overnight, Claire. They rot quietly, from the inside. You just have to know where to cut." I opened a new folder on my desktop and named it Project Dawn, because tomorrow, I wasn't hiding anymore. My father's 60th birthday was supposed to be a victory parade, chandeliers, champagne, and a press release announcing a new philanthropy initiative. The irony? Every cent funding that charity came from the offshore accounts I'd already exposed in my private files. He didn't know it yet, but tonight, the empire he worshipped would crack right under the golden plates. The invitation had arrived 3 days earlier, embossed gold, sent to my apartment in Brooklyn. Family dinner. No press. Be civil. I almost laughed. Civility was my father's favorite mask. Noah told me not to go. "He's baiting you. Don't walk into his arena." I smiled. He built the arena. I just changed the lighting. When I stepped into the ballroom at the Whitmore estate, every head turned. I wore red, the color he hated, the one my mother used to wear when she wanted to remind the world she wasn't invisible. For a moment, even my father froze mid-toast. "Well," he said finally, forcing a smile, "the prodigal daughter returns." "Don't worry," I replied. "I didn't come for the inheritance, just dessert." A few chuckles broke the tension, but his jaw twitched. The cameras from business magazines clicked like insects around us. He lifted his glass. To family, even the ones who forget where they came from. I raised mine. And to truth, even when it's inconvenient. Dinner was a performance. My father held court like a king, surrounded by investors, politicians, and sycophants who laughed at his every anecdote. He bragged about growth, influence, legacy, words that meant nothing when you'd seen the ledgers behind them. Halfway through, he gestured toward me. You know, Claire once thought she could run a company on idealism alone. But she's young, she'll learn that principles don't pay the bills. Forks paused midair. That was my cue. I stood, the click of my heels echoing against the marble. Actually, Dad, I did learn that. Which is why I made sure the IRS got those charity statements you forgot to file. Huh? The room went silent. He blinked, face blank for a second before he forced another smile. I'm not sure what you're implying. Oh, I think you are. I pulled my phone from my clutch, swiping the screen. Would you like me to play the recording where you call Horizon Holdings your private fund? Or maybe the one where you joke about buying silence with stock options? Gasps rippled around the table. Someone whispered, "Is she serious?" My father's voice dropped low, controlled. Enough, Claire. Sit down. No, I said. You've talked enough for a lifetime. He rose slowly, the mask slipping. You think this makes you powerful? You've just declared war on your own blood. I'm just finishing what you started, I said. You built an empire on lies. I'm giving it an honest name. A flash went off a journalist's camera, then another. He'd invited press after all, hidden among guests. His little PR stunt had turned into evidence collection. Security, he barked. Escort her out. Nobody moved. Even Margaret, standing quietly near the back with a tray of champagne, didn't blink. Her eyes met mine for a fraction of a second, proud, unflinching. I set my glass down, calm. Don't bother. I'm leaving anyway. But you might want to check your inbox before dessert. The SEC just got a copy of your offshore accounts. The color drained from his face. I turned, the chandelier's light catching my red dress like a flame. Happy birthday, Dad. By the time I reached the driveway, my phone was vibrating non-stop texts from Noah, Margaret, reporters. Inside, chaos had replaced music. And as I stepped into the night air, one thought burned through the noise. He built the kingdom. But tonight, I lit the match. By morning, the story was everywhere. Whitmore charity under federal review. Insider sources claim offshore funds linked to family trust. My father's face flashed across every screen, confident in one photo, cornered in the next. Noah called before sunrise. They froze his accounts, he said. SEC and FBI are coordinating. Someone leaked everything. Someone? I smiled. Try everyone. Because once the first file hit the light, the rest followed: journalists, whistleblowers, former employees. Truth spread faster than fire. By noon, Whitmore Tower looked like a crime scene. Agents in navy jackets marched through the glass doors, briefcases in hand, while cameras swarmed the sidewalk. From across the street, I watched as the logo, our family name, carved in steel, gleamed under flashing sirens. A monument turned into evidence. Noah stood beside me. You could walk away now, Claire. You've won. Not yet, I said. He still thinks he can fix it, and I was right. That evening, my father called. Claire, he said, voice calm, calculated. We need to talk. You mean negotiate? You've made your point. But this goes beyond you. Families don't destroy each other in public. Funny, I said. You never had a problem destroying me in private. He sighed, that practiced exhale he used before firing someone. You don't understand what you've done. This will ruin thousands of employees, investors, reputations. Then maybe they'll finally stop worshipping thieves. I cut in. His tone hardened. You think you can build something from ashes? Without my name, no one will trust you. I laughed softly. They already do. Because I didn't inherit your empire, Dad. I rebuilt it. 2 days later, I got the call. The FBI wanted a statement, not as a suspect, but as a cooperating witness. Margaret had turned over every drive, every recording, every receipt she'd saved for 20 years. Her testimony was devastating. He believed loyalty meant silence, she told agents. But Claire proved loyalty can mean truth. By the time they escorted him out of the Whitmore penthouse, my father wasn't the titan of finance anymore. He was just an old man, clutching a briefcase full of lies. I watched the footage on TV from my apartment, his silver hair disheveled, his cufflinks glinting like handcuffs. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like surgery necessary, brutal, final. That night, Noah came by with takeout and 2 glasses of wine. He raised his glass. To independence and perfect timing. To Margaret, I said, clinking his glass. She waited 40 years to see justice. We ate in silence for a while, the city humming below. Finally, Noah said, "You ever think he'll forgive you?" I shook my head. "He doesn't know how. Forgiveness requires humility. He only knows control. And you?" "I don't need forgiveness," I said quietly. "I just need distance." 3 days later, a package arrived at my door, no return label, just my name and my father's handwriting. Inside was a single envelope, a photograph of me as a child, standing in front of Whitmore Tower, holding his hand. On the back, 3 words. "You were right." For the first time in years, I cried not from guilt, not from grief, but from relief. He had finally seen me, even if it was too late. By the end of the week, federal charges were filed. The board ousted him, the shareholders elected a temporary CEO, and the press dubbed me the daughter who dismantled the dynasty. They thought it was revenge. It wasn't. It was reclamation. Standing on my balcony that night, the skyline shimmered like possibility. The Whitmore name no longer scared me. It was mine now, purified, rebuilt. "He said I couldn't survive without him," I whispered to the city. Turns out, I was never supposed to. The morning after my father's arrest, I woke to silence. No calls, no headlines screaming my name, no board meetings. Just the hum of the city outside and a thin line of sunlight cutting across the room, soft, almost forgiving. For the first time in my life, I didn't feel like someone's daughter. I just felt like myself. I made coffee in the chipped mug Noah had bought for my apartment and opened my laptop. The inbox was flooded, reporters, investors, former Whitmore employees offering statements of support or apology. But one email stood out. From Margaret Ellis. Subject: something new. It contained 3 words and an address in Midtown. No explanation, no warning. When I arrived, the building surprised me, a modest brick structure tucked between 2 skyscrapers. Inside, dust floated in the morning light. A single plaque leaned against the wall. Aurelia Foundation. Margaret was there, hair tied back, wearing a navy suit I'd never seen before. "You're early," she said, smiling faintly. "Good. You'll need time to see what we're building." "What is this?" I asked, staring at the empty rooms. "Your empire," she said simply, "but built differently this time." She led me through the space old offices turned into open workrooms, a glass conference area overlooking the street. On one desk sat folders labeled Outreach Programs, Financial Literacy for Women, Legal Aid Grants. "I don't want to rebuild Whitmore," I said. "Not after everything." "Good," she replied. "We're not rebuilding it. We're rewriting it." Margaret explained her idea. A foundation that would use recovered Whitmore assets to fund women-led startups, whistleblower protection, and ethical business education. The same resources my father used to control people repurposed to free them. I felt something shift inside me. "Are you sure this can work?" I asked. She looked at me, steady. "Empires rot when they're built on fear. They thrive when they're built on purpose. You already proved you can tear one down. Let's see if you can build one up." By summer, Aurelia Foundation had its first team, 6 women, one of them Noah's younger sister, an analyst with a fire not unlike my own. We worked 12-hour days fueled by caffeine and fury, writing proposals, vetting applicants, designing mentorships. Every donation form we filed, every contract we signed, it felt like healing in paperwork form. The press tried to romanticize it, calling me the heiress who rebuilt morality. They didn't know how messy it really was, how many nights I woke up shaking from dreams of boardrooms and locked doors, of my father's voice whispering, "You're nothing without me." But every morning, I walked into our new office, saw the women whose lives we were changing, and remembered why I'd started. One afternoon, Noah appeared at my door, holding a folder. "Funding proposal from Stanford," he said. "They want you to guest lecture on corporate ethics. Imagine that, the Whitmore name teaching honesty." I laughed, shaking my head. "Maybe that's exactly what it needs," he smiled. "You've come a long way, Claire." "Not far enough," I said, gazing out the window. "Not until the world remembers what we stand for, not who we came from." That evening, Margaret and I stood in the lobby, watching workers hang the final plaque above the entrance. "Aurelia Foundation, built on truth." Margaret handed me a small box. Inside lay a key, old, brass, heavy. "Your mother gave this to me years ago," she said. "It opened her studio. She told me one day you'd need it not to open a door, but to remember you could." I closed my fingers around it, throat tight. She was right, I whispered. Outside, the city glowed not in the cold gold of the Whitmore Towers, but in the warm light of something reborn. 6 months later, I stood at the gates of Whitmore Estate, the house where everything began, and everything ended. The iron bars still bore the family crest, though the paint had started to peel. For the first time, I didn't feel dread standing here. I felt distance, like looking at an artifact from another life. The place was quiet now. My father was serving his sentence in a minimum security facility upstate. The staff had long been dismissed, the garden overgrown. It didn't smell like home anymore, just marble and dust. I walked through the halls, heels clicking on the same floors where I used to chase after him as a child, clutching a notebook, hoping he'd notice my ideas. He never did. The silence was loud enough to echo memories, dinners where I sat invisible, meetings where my opinions became his statements, applause that never reached my name. But those ghosts didn't haunt me anymore. They watched. In his old study, the air still smelled faintly of cedar and bourbon. The same mahogany desk stood untouched, papers stacked neatly by someone who still believed he might return. I opened the top drawer. Inside, I found a photograph me, at 12 years old, standing beside him during a groundbreaking ceremony, holding a gold shovel half my size. His smile in the picture was perfect. Mine wasn't. I slipped the photo into my pocket, then took out an envelope. It contained one thing: a single sheet of paper, my handwriting precise and calm. "Check your accounts. I'm not your shadow anymore." I placed it in the center of his desk, right where I'd once left my keys. Then I set down another item beside it, the brass key my mother had given me through Margaret. My past, returned. My future, chosen. Outside, the estate agent was waiting by the fountain. "Miss Whitmore," he greeted. "Everything in order?" "Call me Claire Hawthorne," I said, my mother's maiden name. He nodded. "Understood." The buyer confirmed. "The proceeds will go directly to the Aurelia Foundation." I smiled. Then it's officially not his house anymore. He handed me the final document. I signed, the ink gliding across the page, like a closing note in a symphony. Just like that, the last piece of the Whitmore empire passed into new hands, the money transformed into scholarships, small business loans, and safe futures for women who'd once been silenced like me. As I walked down the driveway, sunlight spilled across the gravel, warm and steady. A black car slowed at the gates. The window rolled down. Noah. He leaned out, smiling. "So? How does it feel?" "Like the air finally belongs to me," I said. He laughed. "You know, you don't have to do everything alone. The foundation's growing fast. We'll need someone to lead expansion west." "I'll think about it," I said, sliding into the passenger seat. "But first, coffee." "Coffee?" "Yeah," I smirked. "Every empire starts somewhere." As we drove away, the estate shrank in the rearview mirror until it was nothing but a shadow on the horizon. Ahead, Manhattan shimmered alive, unbroken, waiting. I took out my phone. A new message blinked on the screen. From Margaret. Subject: new case. Senator's wife. Financial coercion. She's scared. Said she read about you. Can we take it? I smiled. "We, always," I texted back. "Send her our way." Because this was what I'd been building, not a kingdom, not revenge, but a refuge. For every woman who'd been told she couldn't survive without someone. For every daughter who'd been taught that love meant control. As we merged onto the highway, Noah glanced at me, You ever think he'll forgive you? I looked out the window at the streaks of sunlight breaking through the skyline. He doesn't need to, I said, because I finally forgave myself. The city stretched before us, glowing with possibility. Once, my father said I couldn't live without him. Now, the empire he built on power was gone. And the one I built on truth was just beginning. I rested my hand on the window, feeling the vibration of the road, the pulse of my own life. The world outside wasn't waiting for permission anymore. Neither was I.